Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that yesterday had been erased. The newspaper says that an event that you saw never happened. Old photographs have been erased, history books have been rewritten, and everybody around you is insisting that this is how it's always been. 1984 asked the question, what happens when a government or any powerful group or institution gains so much control that it can dictate what's true and what's right, even when it contradicts what you're seeing or hearing or experiencing in your real day to day life? And it asked that question through the life of one ordinary man living in that system called Winston Smith. Winston isn't a revolutionary or especially brave. He's not a hero. He's just an ordinary guy who goes to work every day for in a place called the Ministry of Truth. But the Ministry of Truth doesn't tell the truth and it doesn't preserve history. It rewrites it. Whenever the party, who's the group in charge politically, changes its policies or its ideology or makes a prediction that turns out to be wrong, Winston's job is to erase the evidence and replace it with a new version that supports whatever the party is currently claiming to be true. So old newspapers disappear. Yesterday is rewritten to fit today's ideology, and you have to believe it, even if you know it's not true. Winston is trapped in a place called Airstrip 1, which used to be England, but now it's just a province of a massive superstate called Oceania, which is ruled by a totalitarian power called the party. Information is managed, it's constantly controlled, so that the party can manipulate people's emotions, and they can always make sure that they're always dependent on the party to tell them what to think. The party uses surveillance, propaganda, censorship, editing history, ideological extremism, and social pressure to control every part of people's lives, especially what they're allowed to think. They control not just what information they get, but the language they can use, their education, their sexuality, their human emotions and connections. And you don't have the right to privacy because anybody can inspect your life at any time to make sure that you're agreeing with the things that you're supposed to agree with, and they can punish you when you don't, whether that's legally or with violence or with social shaming. Having a dissenting opinion about anything or even questioning things, it's no longer allowed. And Big Brother's face watches everything that people do, even at home, with the slogan, Big Brother is watching you, through posters and especially through screens that are everywhere, and they're always watching and recording with visuals and sound. And it's not just to prevent crime, it's to prevent independent thought, which is now known as Thoughtcrime. You can't have opinions of your own or live however you want because it'll get you arrested by the thought police. In order to control language, they use something called Newspeak, which is a way to control the actual words that people are allowed to say, because if they control language, then they can control your thoughts and your feelings. The dominant group decides what the correct words are to use, what's allowed, and they remove certain words from use entirely, because it's harder for you to rebel and communicate certain ideas if you don't even have the words for them. Another really cool concept in the book is doublethink, which means believing in two contradictory things at one time. So, for example, freedom is slavery, war is peace, and having the ability to ignore the evidence of your senses, like what's right in front of you. Like when you're seeing something in front of you and you're like, no, I didn't see that. That's not happening. And 1984 is fiction, but we do see that sometimes. And that's the world that Winston is living in. People sometimes ask if 1984 is criticizing the political left or the political right, and the answer is both. In 1984, the party has both left-wing and right-wing elements. Regardless, the goal is to use extremism and manipulation to control people, to eliminate their freedoms, and force them to conform to whatever the ideology is at the moment. This is one reason why 1984 continues to spark conversation. In our hyper-connected world with smartphones and algorithms and data collection, targeted ads, social media tracking, and social shaming, this feels really modern. And of course, it's more subtle than in 1984, but it raises a lot of similar questions. And those questions are just as relevant today as they were when the book was published. In 1984, Winston meets a young woman called Julia at work, and he's really attracted to her. But totalitarianism has made romantic relationships between men and women basically illegal. Marriage exists, sex exists, and porn exists. What's definitely not allowed is romance or falling in love or any emotional bonds with anybody. Even family relationships like with parents or children or siblings or best friends, because all of that competes with loyalty and love for the party. In fact, neighbors spy on neighbors and children turn in parents for disloyalty to the party. Friends turn in friends. So people avoid emotional intimacy of any kind and they don't trust each other. So when Julia passes Winston a note that says, I love you, he's thinking like, she's setting me up, right? But she's not. And they eventually become secret lovers. And their relationship becomes one of the only genuine human connections in the entire novel, which is exactly why it can't survive. Winston has a friend, or he thinks he's a friend, a guy called O'Brien. And O'Brien is intelligent, charismatic, he's mysterious. And Winston really admires him. He thinks that O'Brien is part of a secret resistance movement against Big Brother, against the government. O'Brien gives Winston a forbidden book that's basically criticizing the party. But of course, because Big Brother's always watching, this book is a trap. It's really just to see if Winston agrees with it. O'Brien teams up with an antique shop owner who rents Winston and Julia a room, like a motel room, so that they can spend time together. But the room is bugged the entire time, and Winston and Julia end up arrested by the thought police. They're taken to a place called the Ministry of Love, where they use violence to torture people that have the wrong opinions. And here's when you see that obedience is not enough, because what they're looking for is psychological surrender. O'Brien wants Winston to say that he believes things that he knows are not true. And one really important quote in this part of the novel is that freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. The ability to recognize reality when it's right in front of you and not say that 2 + 2 = 5 just because that's what the majority wants you to say. The thought police uses Winston's fear of rats to torture him until he finally betrays Julia and he screams for the torture to happen to her instead of him because he can't take it anymore. And it's devastating because it means that ideology won. They broke that human bond and that loyalty between these two people, and they made him loyal to the group instead. And in the end, they do release Winston, but he's not Winston anymore. They've changed him to be whatever it is that they want him to be. And in the final heartbreaking lines, Winston actually says that he loves Big Brother. So they do get to him. There isn't a heroic ending. What you see is a man broken down by pressure and violence and the lack of freedom to think on his own. So regarding symbols and devices, Orwell uses Big Brother especially, but also telescreens, citizen spies, and the thought police as symbols for control and surveillance culture and conformity. The slogans like freedom is slavery are an example of paradox, and doublethink, which we see throughout the novel, is a recurring motif. There are a few examples of foreshadowing too, but I think the rats are really what stands out the most. And then there's, of course, the use of irony, because the Ministry of Truth spreads lies, the Ministry of Love loves violence, the Ministry of Peace wages war. Everything is just backwards. Winston's story has shown us a lot more than just one man's struggle. It's about Orwell's larger warning, about groups or any totalitarian system that demands unquestioning obedience and discourages independent thought and places ideology above objective truth. At its core, 1984 is asking a question that every generation must answer for itself. How much freedom are we willing to surrender before we no longer recognize that we've lost it? Tell me what you think of 1984. I would especially like to know what other books you'd like to see in the channel. There are so many amazing books to talk about. It's so exciting. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for the next great book.